Leave the World Behind delves into the fragility of human connections amid an unfolding crisis, filled with suspense and unexpected twists. The story begins with a view of the Earth, followed by a glimpse of America where the sun is rising. It all starts on a seemingly ordinary day. We focus on the Sanford family, Clay, his wife Amanda, and their two children, Rose and Archie. Clay is a professor at a university in New York. He is calm and rarely gets angry, traits Amanda shares. Amanda works at an advertising company. Their youngest daughter, Rose, is an innocent girl watching the last season of her favorite show. Archie is older and going through puberty, which makes him act out and often annoy his sister. Overall, they are an ordinary family. On this particular day, when Clay wakes up, Amanda is already awake. She feels different today and tells Clay that when she looked out the window this morning, she thought it would be nice to go on a holiday. So she booked a house on Long Island without telling him, knowing he would otherwise try to convince her not to. Clay agrees, Amanda gets the kids ready, and in the next scene, we see the family in their car heading to Long Island. The family was excited when they arrived at the house Amanda had booked online. It was a beautiful property, and everyone was impressed. The house had a pool, so the children eagerly ran to it. While Clay began unpacking their things from the car, Amanda decided to head to the market to buy food and drinks for their stay. At the market, Amanda noticed a man purchasing an unusually large amount of water and food. It seemed excessive for just one family, almost as if he were preparing for a major disaster. Amanda found his behavior strange but chose not to approach him. She completed her shopping and returned home with the groceries. Clay, who had previously been a smoker, avoided smoking in front of the children. After spending some quality time together, the family decided to visit the beach. They enjoyed a peaceful and relaxing time there, but they saw a ship in the distance and wondered if it would change its course. Clay also mentioned that he had heard there were many monkeys in the area. Even after 2 hours, the ship remained visible, and it seemed to be getting closer. Amanda, feeling uneasy, asked Clay to wake up and check on the situation. The ship continued to approach, and Amanda was alarmed by its persistent presence and lack of movement. Clay instructed everyone to leave the beach immediately. There was a commotion as people scrambled away, and the ship eventually came to a halt on the beach as if it were unmanned. After this unsettling incident, the beach was soon deserted. Clay asked a nearby guard about the situation, and the guard suggested that there might have been a problem with the ship's navigation system. Back at the house, Clay and Amanda discovered that the internet was down, and the TV was not working, preventing them from ordering food online. They ended up having burgers for dinner. Later, when the kids were asleep, Amanda and Clay were having a drink downstairs when they heard a knock at the door. The unexpected noise startled them, and they were briefly frightened. When Amanda and Clay opened the door, they were surprised to find a man named Scott and his daughter Ruth standing there. It was unusual for strangers to show up at their rental. Scott explained that this was actually their home, and he knew Amanda's name, though they hadn't previously communicated. Scott asked if they could come in, and Clay agreed. Scott explained that they lived in the city, but had come out here due to a blackout and loss of power in their apartment building. He had recently had knee surgery and couldn't manage the stairs, so they needed a place to stay. Despite their reservation, Amanda was hesitant and reluctant to allow them in. Clay was open to the idea, reasoning that if this was their home, they should be able to stay there. However, Amanda was uncomfortable with the idea of sharing the space with strangers and insisted that they could not stay. Ruth, Scott's daughter, seemed distressed by the rejection, insisting that the house belonged to them. Amanda and Clay then discussed the situation privately. Amanda had doubts and was concerned that Scott might be lying or have ulterior motives. After their discussion, Amanda decided to ask Scott for proof of his identity before making a final decision. But there was a problem. Scott had left his wallet behind. Despite this, he didn't seem like he was being dishonest. He appeared genuinely frightened. To make matters worse, Ruth turned on the TV, which was broadcasting alarming news on every channel, signaling a serious crisis. Scott's earlier claims about a citywide blackout and lack of internet or information now seemed credible. This convinced Amanda and Clay that something serious was occurring, so they decided to let Scott and his daughter stay. However, Ruth was visibly upset and expressed her frustration, feeling like they were being treated like servants in their own home. Scott, who had a background in cybersecurity, seemed to have some idea of what was going on. The next morning, Rose woke up Amanda, asking her to fix the internet so she could watch the final episode of Friends. Amanda then checked her phone and noticed some news alerts, but they vanished before she could show them to Clay. Clay suggested that the situation might be due to a hack, but Amanda was primarily worried about having two strangers in their home. After having coffee, Clay decided to go to the market, hoping someone there might be able to shed some light on what was happening. When Ruth and Scott woke up, they asked Clay about Amanda. He informed them that she had gone to the market. Amanda then shared the news alerts she had seen, but she didn't want to alarm anyone. Scott suggested that the situation might not be as severe as it seemed, proposing that there could be a problem with the system, and they shouldn't overthink it. Despite Scott's reassurance, the fact that all their systems were down left him feeling uncertain. Meanwhile, Rose noticed a large number of deer outside, which was unusual since animals typically don't behave this way. Scott decided to visit a neighbor's house to gather more information. The neighbor's house was in disarray, with scattered belongings and no heat. Meanwhile, Clay's GPS stopped working, causing him to get lost and feel frightened. As he sat in his car, he saw a terrified woman speaking in Spanish. Translations available online reveal that she was panicking. While trying to get his bearings, Clay heard the sound of a plane overhead. Looking up, he saw red papers falling from the plane, which were actually documents written in Persian. In the meantime, Rose and Archie ventured into the forest. They discovered a cabin, and Rose mentioned seeing a large number of deer, though Archie dismissed her observation and instead told her a scary story. On their way back, Archie was bitten by a bug. Scott tried to use the satellite phone, but it wasn't working. Earlier, the film had shown that American satellites had changed their direction, possibly explaining why the phone wasn't functioning. Scott then went to the beach and found a plane wrecked on the shore, with corpses scattered around. It was a heartbreaking scene. No survivors were found at the crash site, only dead bodies, which was unusual as there should have been some injured people. Then, Scott saw another plane approaching. Realizing it was about to crash as well, he fled in a panic, and the plane crashed onto the shore, sending a huge wave of water over him. Seeing all this firsthand, Scott understood that the situation was spiraling out of control. He returned home but chose not to tell his daughter about the plane crash. Instead, he told her that she got wet from the pool and sent Ruth to fetch dry clothes. He also informed Amanda that the satellite phone wasn't working. Despite the situation, Amanda was skeptical, so Scott insisted, "I saw a plane crash with my own eyes." As the kids were still outside, Scott heard another sound, adding to the growing sense of dread. A deafening noise erupted, causing Scott to cover his ears. Amanda, alarmed, rushed into the jungle to find the children, who were eventually brought back home. Everything seemed to be fine, but Clay was still missing. Archie mentioned that he felt strange because he hadn't properly covered his ears during the noise. Amanda sent the kids to their room and asked Scott to explain the sound. Scott speculated that it wasn't from a plane or a bomb, but might have been some kind of sonic weapon. Unable to provide any more clarity, Scott faced Amanda's frustration. She criticized him for frightening her with big theories and suggested filling the bathtub with water, unsure how long this situation would last. Scott had hoped to keep the situation from his daughter, but now it was clear that the crisis was real. Amanda recalled seeing a man at the market who seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Meanwhile, returned and mentioned finding a plane crash along with papers related to the situation. Archie saw a board in a video and mentioned that it had some writing on it, suggesting that America had been attacked. Although he couldn't understand everything written on the board, he was sure that the situation was dire and questioned who was responsible. Amanda and Clay decided to return to the city for their children's safety, despite Scott's warning that the situation in the city would likely be worse. Scott advised them to stay where they were, as it was safer. Ignoring his advice, Amanda and Clay headed for the highway but found it blocked by a collision of brand new Tesla cars left in auto mode. The entire road was obstructed by these unmanned vehicles. Realizing that the road was impassable and more cars were coming, Amanda and Clay quickly turned back to avoid further danger. They managed to escape and return to their location. They were all caught up in a situation that seemed beyond their control, hinting at possible involvement in secret Pentagon project. A few days ago, I transferred a large sum of money, and influential people were already receiving alarming news. He had warned me to take care of myself, and now I understood the gravity of his advice. He seemed to be genuinely concerned for my safety. In addition to this, there were a few personal items of theirs. To cope with the grief, they played music and danced. Meanwhile, Ruth and Clay were sitting on the lawn discussing the situation. Clay revealed that they had kept one thing from them. At the beach, a sea vehicle had come to a stop and he had heard an unusual noise. They later went to the pool where they encountered another strange occurrence, a large group of flamingos. Soon after, the eerie noise returned, causing everyone to panic and flee. They all scrambled away in fear, but the sound persisted, making them even more terrified. When the noise finally stopped, the entire group was left feeling deeply unsettled. They ended up huddling together for safety, with the family sharing a bed for comfort, while Ruth stayed close to her father. During the night, a restless Rose confided in her mother, saying she was exhausted from waiting. The next morning, things took a turn for the worse when Archie started losing his teeth. Amanda and Clay were overwhelmed with fear, unable to comprehend what was happening or how to get help since they had no means of communication. Rose was also missing, adding to their distress. Scott suggested that Danny, the man Amanda had seen in the parking lot, lived nearby and might have supplies and medicine that could help Archie. Ruth was upset with her father for leaving her behind to assist others. Scott assured Ruth that he would return within an hour. He and Clay then headed to Danny's house to find help for Archie. When they arrived and knocked on the door, Danny greeted them with a gun in hand and instructed them to stay away from his car while they talked. Scott was taken aback as Danny had once been his friend, but now seemed completely changed, as if a war had started. Scott pleaded for Danny's assistance, explaining that something was seriously wrong with his son. Archie was vomiting and losing his teeth. Danny downplayed the situation, saying that losing teeth wasn't a big deal and had happened elsewhere as well. The loud, recurring noise was having a severe impact on their minds. Danny told them he couldn't help and insisted they leave. He expressed his disbelief that they had even managed to leave their home, adding that the situation had changed drastically. Scott, confused, asked Danny why he was speaking this way, reminding him they were friends. Danny replied that those were old times. The circumstances had shifted. He explained that they were under attack and that this was now a war. He had to prioritize protecting his own family and would only do what he believed was right. Clay asked where they should go and who could help them, to which Danny responded that money was useless without a functioning government. Despite this, Danny agreed to help them. Before they left, he mentioned that the attack might be the work of Koreans or Chinese, reflecting on how America had made many enemies over the years. Clay then showed Danny the paper he had found, leading Danny to believe it might actually be the work of Iran. Despite the uncertainty, no one had clear information about the situation. Danny mentioned that before the phones went dead, a friend had reported a similar incident in San Diego, though the dropped papers were in Chinese. Scott, Clay, and Archie then got back in the car. Before they left, Scott asked Clay if he was with him, wanting to confirm his support. When Clay questioned why, Scott explained that he had suspected something like this might happen all along. To effectively destabilize a country, there are 3 key strategies. First, isolate the country by cutting off all communication and transportation, rendering it helpless and disconnected from the world. We've seen this step in action. The second strategy involves deploying a secret weapon and spreading false information to incite fear and confusion among the population. This misinformation causes people to doubt each other, heightens their anxiety, and disrupts their sense of security. When everyone starts creating their own versions of the story, it intensifies the overall atmosphere of fear, leaving the target even more vulnerable mentally. With the enemy or the cause of the attack hidden, people will turn against each other. If the first 2 steps succeed, the third step will naturally follow: a full-blown war and the eventual defeat of the enemy. Clay asks about this third step, and Scott explains that it involves escalating the conflict to global proportions, leading to the enemy's ultimate downfall. With the government shattered and laws no longer in effect, chaos ensues. On one side, Ruth and Amanda search the jungle for Rose. They come across the cabin where they had a brief disagreement. As they continued, they heard distant sounds of war and screams, signaling that while they were safe for now, the city had descended into violence. People were killing, looting, and committing atrocities in the absence of law and order. As the film progresses, we see the aftermath, the chaos unfolding around them, with scenes of destruction and lawlessness. Rose, having seen the house before, discovers the bunker that Scott had mentioned. Inside, she finds a well-stocked supply of food, a power source, a DVD player, and a collection of films and series including the last season of Friends. Rose, who hadn't seen the final episode, decides to watch it, concluding the film, and that wraps up our summary. While the film doesn't provide all the answers, it suggests that Danny and Scott's suspicions could be accurate. It seems that multiple countries might have teamed up to launch a major attack on America, aiming for its total collapse. The strange behavior of the deer could be linked to some covert weapon affecting the navigation systems, which in turn disrupted the animal's migration. War is an incredibly frightening prospect, regardless of where it takes place. We hope you found our explanation helpful. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel.